An unparalleled artist, amazing teacher, celebrity, and TV host like no other. Bob Ross was all that and much, much more. He was a cultural icon, and for many of us, a major part of our childhood. But how much do you really know about the man behind the joy of painting?
Hello, I'm Bob Ross, and I'd like to welcome you to the 29th Joy of Painting series.
The beginning of the legend that we know as Bob Ross had pretty humble beginnings. He was born to a waitress and a carpenter on 29th of October 1942. And from the get-go, there was the sparkle of kindness in Bob Ross that will define his adulthood on TV and in his personal life. Bob would find and care for injured animals as a young kid, many of whom stayed with him for a long while and even made a debut on his show. Now, the thing is, Bob Ross was actually not very academically successful. He dropped out of school in just the 9th grade and chose to work with his dad. But even carpentry did not fit right with him. While working, he accidentally severed his left index finger. He was one finger short after that and decided to quit carpentry completely. During his teens, Bob had his first child. Who was the mother? No one really knows. Bob Ross was super secretive about his personal life. By the time Bob was 18, he had another career path lined up, the Army. To be precise, he joined the Air Force, and he was doing quite well. He reached the rank of Master Sergeant. At one point, he got transferred to the clinic at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska as a first sergeant. And this is where the first seeds of his artistic journey would be planted. Bob, for the first time, saw the snow and the mountains in Alaska, and those two things would become a recurring theme in most of his future artworks. He also took some art classes at the Anchorage USO Club. In the meantime, he wanted to augment his pay from the military, so he also started working as a bartender. And it was on this job that he came across something that changed his outlook on art. He, for the first time, saw the show The Magic of Oil Painting. The Magic of Oil Painting was hosted by German painter Bill Alexander, and he utilized a unique painting style known as alla prima, or the first attempt, for those of us who are not Italian. Basically, alla prima dates back to the 16th century, and the style mainly focuses on creating art by layering wet paint on top of each other. Hence, it is given the name wet on wet technique. Bob Ross loved this new method, and as you have probably seen on this show, he utilized it all the time. But Bob wasn't just an artist, he was also an entrepreneur. He would sell gold prospecting pans to tourists with his own landscape paintings on them. Imagine that, the Bob Ross selling some pans to tourists which he painted on as souvenirs. And well, the business was a huge hit. He was making way more money from these sales than he was from his military salary. Bob had been in the military for nearly 20 years now, and well, it did not sit right with him. His major gripe was the kind of attitude he needed to have for the job. In his own words, "I was the guy who makes you scrub the latrine, the guy who makes you make your bed, the guy who screams at you for being late to work. The job requires you to be a mean, tough person." And I was fed up with it. I promised myself that if I ever got away from it, it wasn't going to be that way anymore. And got away he did. In 1981, Bob retired from the military and went back home to Florida. And there he met his idol in person, Bill Alexander, and learned from him after joining the Alexander Magic Art Supplies Company. Bob really honed his craft, especially the wet-on-wet technique, for which he himself designed several tools like paintbrushes and knives. For a while afterwards, he worked as a traveling salesman and a tutor. You see, even Bob Ross needed someone's help to realize his own talent, and that person would be Annette Kowalski. Kowalski had been attending one of his sessions and immediately recognized the amazing talent he possessed. She saw the spark that would one day light an artistic fire in the hearts of thousands across the world from behind the TV screen. Somehow, she convinced Bob to try to make his own path. Together, they both started a company, and Bob Ross became the face of it. It wasn't an instant success, though. There were some really tough times at the start. You remember that signature hairstyle that Bob Ross had? Well, at the start that wasn't exactly a choice. Bob usually had a crew-cut haircut, but when money ran short, he had to opt for the perm hairstyle that would go on to become his iconic look. The man didn't even like the style that much. He only kept it since the perm was on his logo, so changing it would be bad for the brand. Anyways, back to the life of Bob Ross. The company Bob had created got its first big break in 1982. A station in Virginia taped one of Bob Ross's lessons and decided to run it as a pilot. And how couldn't the world love it? It was Bob Ross after all. 60 PBS stations picked up the show in the first year, and the rest is history. The show was a wild success. It ran from 1983 to 1994, with 32 seasons and nearly 400 episodes. And the reruns, there are too many to keep track of. Each episode was filmed in just 2 days. Bob Ross would make 3 paintings total for each and every episode. The first painting was made as a reference point. It would be placed off camera, and Bob would look at it while painting the second one, which we got to watch being created. And then there was a third, more detailed painting made for the How to books Bob published. The reception of the show was massive. Bob Ross became a phenomenon. Aspiring artists and kids could now tune into the PBS or CBC channels and watch a maestro at work. It wasn't just art being created, it was art being taught. He firmly believed that everyone had the potential to express themselves through art. He often used to say,
We don't make mistakes, we have happy accidents.
And just to prove that point, he would throw paint on the canvas randomly and then skillfully turn that smudge into something beautiful. A mistake turned into a landmark. And just from the show, you could tell how much of a kind heart Bob had. Bob would receive nearly 200 letters per day from his millions of fans. And in one such letter, a fan said that they could not paint along with Bob because they were colorblind. So, Bob did a special episode where he created a grayscale painting especially for that fan, just to show that you don't need all the colors of the rainbow to be a great artist. Bob would often show off the animals he had rescued, the squirrel named Peapod being a regular. During his time at PBS, Bob never made any money from his paintings or from the show. Since it was PBS, a free educational channel, Bob did all the episodes for free. His stories about the happy little clouds and happy little trees really kept the viewers enchanted throughout the show. And it wasn't just a big show for Americans, turns out. Bob had a huge fan base in Japan. His shows were dubbed over in their runs in Japan, but despite the different voice given to him, Bob still managed to charm the masses. The one time Bob visited Japan, he was swarmed by fans. Even Nintendo wanted a piece of the action, as they tried to make a game on Bob Ross, which unfortunately got scrapped in production. Soon after the show's debut, Bob Ross became a household name. Everyone knew who he was, and everyone still does. Some even called him the guru with the paintbrush. And the impact Bob Ross had on his viewers cannot be overstated. From kids to grandmas and grandpas, everybody loved watching Bob Ross at work. His show was captivating in a sense that cannot be explained. You could take one look and be sitting there for half an hour, seeing beautiful mountains, clouds, and trees come to life. And that inspired millions. People who would never have thought they could paint were creating wonderful art. Every show at the end had Bob Ross pointing out that you can do it too. Who knows how many artists are out there just because this one legendary artist show was playing in front of them as a kid. And it wasn't just the show. Bob also did public lessons attended by thousands of people. He also had stores across America selling art supplies. But why was Bob Ross so successful? Now that is a bigger question to ask and a very tough one to answer. It is difficult to point out one single thing that made him such a phenomenon. It was a combination of his personality, art style, and the sheer positive attitude he brought that made him so lovable. His soft-spoken voice, the educational approach, the mesmerizing painting process, and of course, the lovely vibe. Speaking of his voice, did you know why Bob always whispered? Well, there is an interesting story behind that. You see, the person who inspired Bob Ross was Bill Alexander, but there was one issue. He usually spoke very harshly on his show, and Bob was very much against that. He wanted to be the opposite, and so he decided he was going to be very soft-spoken and nice on his show. He would lower his tone down to a whisper, and that made the show much more relaxing. As a matter of fact, his relaxing voice more or less created the ASMR phenomenon, just not the cringy type that we have nowadays. He was the OG. Bob's relationship with his mentor, Alexander, deteriorated a lot as he became more popular. Alexander believed Bob had betrayed him. "He betrayed me. I invented wet on wet. I trained him, and he thinks he can do it better." Those were Alexander's words for Bob. Despite that, however, Bob found great success. Here is another interesting thing. Bob Ross was actually not a fan of abstract art. According to him, they'd tell you what makes a tree, but they wouldn't tell you how to paint a tree. He preferred painting landscapes with majestic mountains and happy little trees. His artistic style was more realist in nature. His paintings barely ever depicted humans, and often not anything human-related. As Bob Ross himself put it, "If you study my paintings, there are no signs of human life." No doubt Bob made a significant contribution to art during his lifetime. After all, he made around 30,000 paintings in his lifetime. But in my opinion, the biggest of Bob Ross's contributions to the art world was the way he taught. He was encouraging in every aspect of the painting process. He believed everyone could paint well. Art wasn't to be the realm of the elite. It could be a form of expression for anybody. He dedicated his career to instilling the idea in the viewers that you don't have to be Picasso or Michelangelo to be a great artist. Rather, we show people that anybody can paint a picture that they're proud of. It may never hang in the Smithsonian, but it will certainly be something that they'll hang in their home and be proud of. And that's what it's all about. And that carries the essence of what Bob Ross stood for, art for everyone. And his art style reflected that. The wet-on-wet technique he employed was quick, easy to learn, and did not require any highly specialized tools. A person could follow his instructions during his show and have their own piece ready in less than an hour. And once you had made your first painting, a whole world opened up for you. Now let's talk about his married life. Bob was married 3 times. The first time he was married to Vivian Ridge, with whom he had a second son, Robert Stephen Ross. Bob and Vivian got divorced, allegedly because of Bob's extramarital affairs. He then married Jane Ross, who unfortunately passed away from cancer. And the third and final marriage was with Linda Brown, which was incidentally just 2 months prior to his own death. Bob Ross passed away on July 4, 1995. The reason behind his untimely death at 52 years of age was lymphoma. And I wish I could say his last months of life were completely peaceful. You see, the way his company, Bob Ross Incorporated, was set up was that upon the death of one of its partners, the shares would be distributed to the other partners. And with Bob's death, the Kowalskis were to become the sole owners of the company. And well, while Bob did not want to turn his legacy into a money grab, the Kowalskis had different ideas. They began pressuring him while he was ill to hand over his real estate and rights over to them. And when Bob tried to instead leave them to his son and half-brother, the Kowalskis went to the court. Their argument was that all of Bob Ross's work was under hire, so he had no rights to any of it. Crazier part? They won the lawsuit. Not only that, but they were also able to force Bob's son to stop pursuing an art career under the threat of legal action. It wasn't until much later on when Joan Kowalski made an agreement with Steve Ross that he was able to paint publicly again. As for Bob Ross's paintings, not a lot of them were ever sold on the market. The most important piece of his is, of course, the A Walk in the Woods, which was Bob Ross's first television appearance. The current asking price for that piece is $9,850,000. But even without those, the legacy of Bob Ross is everywhere. You can see it in every artist that he inspired, every childhood that he made just a little bit brighter from behind the screen. There are so many new teachers who emulate his style, not only in art, but also in teaching. He was not just an artist or a celebrity, he was an icon for generations. His popularity and lessons continue to inspire even now. During the pandemic, his show gained a new peak in popularity. During the toughest time, when people were confined at home, Bob Ross became an unlikely companion to many of us. It was someplace to relax and get away from the worries and terror around us. The surprising philosophy in his show gave us all some deep things to think about. One such instance was in an episode he recorded after his wife passed away. He smeared some dark paint onto the canvas and said,
I absolutely have to have dark in order to have light. Gotta have dark. Gotta have opposites, dark and light, light and dark, continually in painting. If you have light on light, you have nothing. If you have dark on dark, you basically have nothing. There we go. It's like in life. Gotta have a little sadness once in a while so you know when the good times come. I'm waiting on the good times now.
And that is something that has stuck with me since then. No doubt, every one of Bob Ross's fans has a similar moment from his show that they hold on to, as a gem of a memory to remember him by.